I launched this new Artsy aesthetic brush kit today, and I just wanted to kind of walk you through some of the artwork I created with it, talk you through some of the brushes, and then I will start filming some demo videos so you can really get into how to create with these brushes. They took me, 6 or 7 months to really finalize and be happy with, and they are finally ready for you. If I zoom in here, you can see so many fabulous textures. And really these were designed to create in a very mixed media, artsy, loose, flowy style, but you can also do more detailed illustrations with them, which I will show you here quickly, and then we'll kind of demo some of the brushes. So this is my hero graphic. It was created using only the 30 brushes and stamps in the kit. I created this one, which is probably the first full tutorial I will do for you in the coming weeks. Also has lots of texture. I use a ton of the brushes for this. So it started with this. And you really just need to play with these. Layer them, lots of colors, blending. They're really fun and relaxing to work with. And this is one I did based on a poem I really love. Moon dance, you were not to blame, nor you, lovely white moth, but I saw you together. I love that poem so much, and it has this kind of moody vibe to it. So I went with a darker color palette. And if I zoom in here, you can see, again, my background started with just tons of layering and little doodles and elements of kind of abstract art where you're just doing squiggles and paint swashes and sketching over your artwork, and then some swashes behind the lettering to really make it pop. This one is along a similar vein, but with lighter, more playful colors. So you could just see another example of what you might make for these brushes. I also have some background texture brushes in the kit, so I will show you how to use those. Then we can get into some more detailed artwork. So this is a piece I did, which I think I'm also gonna do a full tutorial for you on. So this is one of the brushes is like a starry shader, and it's made of tons of little stars, and then I added the other stars myself. So that also has tons of textures if you really zoom in, and I went with a darker color palette for the magic for this one. This was my most detailed one. So this is based on a picture. When we lived in Germany, I took this while we were traveling, and I've always loved the picture and wanted to sit down and draw it. So I basically did a lot of line work, and then for the more detailed things, I just kind of drew, you see where the plants are? I just kind of drew where they were gonna be. So I essentially was making my own coloring page, and then using the brushes, I got really detailed with the bricks and the wood texture on the door. Just lots of different textures. Again, lots of layering, lots of different brushes. A little time consuming, but I usually just put on a show. I was watching Netflix while I did this. I added a lot of little details to the windows and the glass panels on the doors. The more details you add and pile on top of each other, the more impressive, I would say, your artwork looks at the end. And it's not really hard. I'm not the world's greatest illustrator, but as you build things, it just starts to really come together and get cuter and cuter. So I will walk you through some of that over the coming weeks. If you have certain things you really want to learn, feel free to message me. But that is the sample artwork I made for this kit. And now I'll just kind of demo some of the brushes with you and talk you through some basic tips for using them. So let's get into playing with some of these brushes. I do have a PDF that you download with this kit if you have already done so. So you can easily get to my website, shop, Instagram, and YouTube. On my website and YouTube is where the coming video tutorials will be. Oops, I've got this out of order here. All right, so page 2 shows you your shaders, your fine liners, which you'll be doing your sketching with, and then also your background textures, which are in the form of a brush. Then you have 15 mixed media brushes, 5 brush pens that are also mixed media style, and 3 splatter stamps. And this will just make it easier for you to kind of see which brush does what as you're working, so you can use it as a reference. I've shown you how the brush looks on white and also on black background. And then just for fun, I did a set of textured bonus heart stamps. I use so many hearts in my work, so I'm always making heart stamps to use because it makes my workflow faster. I used a bunch of them on this piece. I did all my sample artwork in the PDF for you so you can use it as inspiration. I will probably go through most of these on YouTube as free tutorials in the coming weeks to really teach you how to use these brushes. This one I will probably do as well because it is fairly simple. This one is really intricate, so I probably won't do a full tutorial on it, but you're essentially, as I mentioned, just creating your own coloring page and then coloring it in. And you'll use the brushes at a smaller size because it's so much detail. But in the end, it comes out super cool. So I can walk you through some of that as well. But let's play with the brushes first for a little bit. All right, so there are 30 total brushes and stamps, and then you've got the textured hearts. And the hearts are super easy to use. You literally just pick a color and stamp. Some people write me and they'll ask, why is my stamp sideways? So that usually happens for one of two reasons. You've got your canvas turned around and it's not going the right way, or something like that. And there's an easy way to edit that. If you tap your brush stamp and then go to shape, you can tap this little green arrow and adjust the direction of your stamp. So if that is happening to you, check that. You can also just check and see if randomize or azimuth are selected, because that'll make your stamp wonky. So if you just turn those off, it'll orient itself back to standard. You can also select it and move it around manually. So I wanted to touch on that because that is a question I get a ton regarding stamps. All right, so I'm gonna clear that out and go back to my Artsy aesthetic brushes. So we've got two paper textures here. When I am using paper textures, I usually use a gray color. So that's really subtle. I'm gonna look at my camera, make sure you can see it. And then I'll move that to the side. So that one's kind of a fine texture if you don't want it to be as noticeable. And then I did a coarse one. That one's a little more noticeable, but sometimes I like the finer texture better. So I went ahead and did both. And you can also play with these settings to make it look more apparent in your artwork. So when we get into the tutorials, I'll walk through that a bit more. If you've taken my watercolor lettering class, we also did that in there, and some of the tutorials I have on the blog. All right, so the freehand fine liner can be done at a variety of sizes, of course, but it does have texture to it, especially if you zoom in. I didn't want it to be too smooth because this brush kit is all about looking realistic and sketchy. So you have that in a fine liner and then also a chunky style, which is great for coloring. And you can see the texture on the edges there. And now we'll get into some of the really mixed media style brushes. Just for fun, I'm gonna switch colors. So they look different at different sizes. I often like to use them really large because you get the most texture, you can see there. And you can layer them. You can blend with other colors. Sometimes I will use multiple layers. Sometimes I'll just scribble. The gouache has a little more texture and streakiness and a lot of loose edges, which gives a really nice texture too. Again, you can layer them. Some are more layerable than others, depending on the opacity. And you can also play with your opacity over here as well. This one is nice and sketchy. This is the dry brush. So I use that one quite a bit as a finalizing element on top of things I've already drawn to add some sketchiness. The graphite is nice and thick. I use this one a lot for coloring, but it still has that nice texture, a little bit chalky, and you can layer it and it gets darker and darker. The coloring pastel is similar, but quite a bit more textured. This one is the other one I use a ton. So I actually just finished some artwork for the monthly calendars that I put out, and also I did some artwork for Paper Like. All the coloring in here is done with this brush. It gives you kind of a chalky look as well. So they work well with that. And then I did it with this. And then I added some more textures on top, but that's all done with the coloring pastel and the graphite. All right, moving on. I'm gonna clear this out The Airy brush is really nice and light, and this one is super layerable. So you can use the same color, you can use different colors to layer. It's all about playing with these brushes and just having fun. Wire brush has all these little dots in it, so that one makes a fun texture as well. Bottle brush, this one reminded me of a bottle brush when I made it, so that's why I called it that. It is good for sketchy looks, or I use this as a basis for a lot of my greenery. So like the wreath on the door, the wreath I just drew there, that wreath, the basis of that and all these is that brush. Subtly stapled. This one has lots of little dots in it. You can see all the subtle little staples. Let me show you in a darker color too. It's got this fun, almost built-in paper-like texture. And if you have my creativity kit, I did compare all these brushes to those to make sure nothing was too similar, but it's a nice complement to those brushes as well. This one is wet chalk. I also use this one in some of my chalk art pieces. Next, we have the Gritty Sketcher. This is one of my favorites for creating texture on the mixed media pieces. See all the lines and texture. And again, play with the size. If it gets smaller, you can really do some cool things with that. Splattered. This one I use a lot when I'm doing greenery and things as well. It's got a lot of splattered texture, and it also looks really artsy, especially if you use it as a giant size and layer it. If you are doing a piece like Que Sera Sera piece, I used each of these color blocks as a different brush, and I just kept layering them. And then that is the sketchy brush we just tried. Just lots of layering and lots of color switching. Next, we have Fizzy Outline. I don't know why, but I super love this brush. It's kind of different and it's just fun for doing artsy stuff. It's got a lot of texture around the edges with a more solid middle. That one I'll use a lot when I'm doing drawing plants and stuff as well on my pieces. Grungy gives us more of like a layered 90s kind of vibe. So I use that one a lot in the mixed media too. It's a little more fuzzy. It works great being layered. I used quite a bit of that one in the moody one I did for the Moon Dance poem. Although that one has lots and lots of layers and textures too. You can see so many of them. I think I used most all of them for that piece as well. Next we have Powdery. This one is nice and light, but if you press hard, a lot of the brushes are pressure sensitive too. So you can start light, press harder, it gets darker, lots of layering. And then I did some in brush pen form. So that way you can do calligraphy with them, or you can just use them for artsiness like we have. So that one, if you wanted to do calligraphy, you get a fun ombre effect with lots of texture, but you can also just draw with it as well. So the sketchy brush pen comes in that format too. You can create some cool pieces with that. We've got a scratchy brush pen. See all that texture? And we have the Artsy brush pen. This one's nice and like painted kind of. And you can always too, let's say let's draw in pink. And then let's add a new layer above it and tap it and create a clipping mask. You can use the same brush or other brushes to, you know, if you wanted to maybe create kind of a rainbow look, you can color right on it using the clipping mask and make some really fun, colorful pieces that are artsy. Let's see, next we have the Glimmer brush. That one's good for adding lots of texture as well. And that Glimmer brush is the one that I use to do that swash around the magic ball. Next we have shaders. So this Fizzle shader and Gritty shader I used a ton when I was creating my book that just came out for pre-order on Amazon, shameless plug. So one thing, I'm just gonna make it really simple. I'm gonna draw a circle, whoops, color fill. If that happens to you, you just have to hold your pencil down and change the color threshold. That's a question I get a lot too. Like, it's not filling my whole shape or it's filling it too much. You just have to adjust that slider there. So again, I'm going to add a new layer and tap clipping mask, and then I will grab, we'll start with the Fizzle shader, a lighter color, and you can do really easy shading with texture. So there's the Fizzle, and then the Gritty is finer. And this is the one I use the most when I'm doing lettering texture. And then the Sparkling shader has tons of little stars actually. So if I'm doing anything, you can't really tell unless you really zoom in, but it definitely works well for, like, I use this for that magic piece as well. And again, play with the sizes to get, you can see the stars more at a bigger size. And then we have, of course, a few splatter stamps because mixed media is not complete without splatters. So you have 3 different splatter stamps here. 1, 2, 3. So I use those a ton as well. You can see that I use them here to come off the paintbrush. I will add them to the edges of hearts. I use those as well when I was doing this in full bloom piece to add splatters around these flowers. These flowers are stamps I'm working on right now that are made from actual flowers. So I am working on that. So hopefully I can share those with you sometime in the near future. And that is really it for the brush overview. I'm also going to try to film today this first tutorial with the Que Sera Sera, just to show you how I did it, because it's a really simple piece to start with and it'll teach you how to use the paper textures well and just have fun and loose, artsy, and something that you can create a lot of fun graphics with. You can make birthday cards, you can make graphics for your social media. So keep an eye on my YouTube for that. I'm planning to have that out the same day I launch this brush kit. If you have questions, as always, feel free to email me. I'm not great about checking messages on Instagram or Facebook, but I check my email multiple times a day. So always be sure to email me versus sending me a social media message. I hope you have a lot of fun with this kit. I can't wait to see what you create. If there is something specific I have shown you here that you would like me to delve into more, please feel free to email me and say, hey, I want to learn this. Can you show us how you did this artwork? And I will make a point to create a YouTube video teaching you that technique. Thank you so much.